is definitely the era of this TikTok trend, or yeah, like if you drop a celebrity and things like that. So all of those things can work because one thing that writers are always looking for, especially with products, is timeliness. Is this product something that people are talking about? I would say search what is popular right now and find how your product fits into that world and think of headlines that connect. Try to think of something that's very unique that 1,000 other companies, brands aren't already pitching or already writing in their subject line.
What's up, everyone? I'm so excited to have the one and only Danielle Broadway on our show. Now, Danielle is a staff entertainment writer at Reuters and an activist with bylines in the LA Times, LA Weekly, Teen Vogue, Cosmo, USA Today. But what's even more important is that she has worked in all areas of journalism. She's written gift guides, she's written for beauty and fashion, and we're going to dive into it right now so that you can learn how to pitch regardless of what industry you're in. So, welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you so much, Gloria. I'm so happy to be here.
Now, the reason why I connected with you is because you really have this mission, right? Where you want to elevate the stories of diverse founders who are doing business through the lens of justice. So, can you tell me a little bit about who are your favorite founders to cover and why it's so important to you?
Well, I love founders that have a bigger mission behind whatever they're covering. So, be that a social justice mission, that means inclusivity, that means maybe doing something that's eco friendly. People who are passionate about whatever they're getting behind. Because if they're not passionate about it, how can I or any other writer kind of join them in that love and admiration for the product or industry that they're in?
Right. No, I love that. That's exactly why you and I are cut from the same cloth because we really live to elevate the voices of diverse founders. So I love that. You're in good company here. So I know you've have a really long, extensive experience in journalism. Can you kind of run through the areas you've covered, the places you've written for, and your general experience in journalism and media?
Sure. I generally cover everything except for cars because I know nothing about those. But I love a combination of topics, be it lifestyle and beauty. I love writing about gardening and ecology, and of course, entertainment, and pretty much the things that sort of intersect with those things. So, like activism, but sometimes I'll write about activism in hair or activism in entertainment, and all of those things that kind of are around that line. And I really, really love compiling things like gift guides and product lineups and things that help people choose from an array of selections and kind of that are fun and playful and give them some ideas about their own fashion.
Yeah, that's amazing. I mean, it's such an oyster, right? There's so many different opportunities for founders to get featured, whether it's product or a business, a service-based business. So, just break it down for me a little bit. For the people who are listening, they're new to PR. What are the differences between some of the things that you'll see, like a staff writer versus an editor or a contributor or a freelancer? What do we need to know as founders when we're pitching to different types of writers?
Right. First, I want to say that this is tricky. So you can read an article from a website and see an author and say, oh, that's a writer for them. I'm going to find their email, which is a great start. But sometimes that writer is a freelancer or their staff or they're an editor. So it's kind of going to play an important role figuring out which one. I worked as a freelancer for quite some time. And I know that even when I love a story, sometimes I can't cover it even after pitching to a few different places, because as a freelancer, you're not staffed. You're not emailing somebody that actually works for that publication. So when an editor sees them pitch, they're kind of like, I'll get a staff writer to cover it. And so that freelancer might get bumped for someone else or something else for a different topic. Whereas if you pitch a staff writer, then they might have a little bit more influence because they're on the payroll and they can kind of say, hey, to their editor that they work with every day, I would like to cover this. And that kind of relationship will continue. Not to knock freelancers, because I'll tell you one thing, we defy odds. So sometimes if we're really passionate, and we can pitch to a bunch of outlets, that staff writer can only pitch to their outlet. And then editors probably are the most powerful in this game because they control which content goes in and which content doesn't. So if you can pitch an editor, that's great. But again, they're limited to that one publication, whereas freelancers have their pick of the world. So it's really important to remember those things and don't be afraid to ask someone. I think generally us writers, we want to be very honest and say, hey, I will try to pitch this, or hey, I can, get this. So don't be afraid.
So freelancers and contributors, they're not on staff, so it's like a second level of pitching where you pitch them and then they pitch to the publication. Whereas if you pitch someone who's on staff, that's only one level of pitching, right?
Right, because no matter what, the writers have to go through the editors.
Mm.
So whether it's freelance or staff writer, they're going to have to send an email or make a call to the editor and say, "Hey, this sound cool," but the editor's going to have the final choice.
Now, what about the kind of levels of pitching? Is it okay to pitch the editor and their staff reporter at the same time? Are you going to know that I pitched you, or it's fine because you get hundreds of emails and it's not really a big deal?
That's a really good question. I would say there's no harm in pitching both, because sometimes editor they get the most emails, they get the most pitches. So editors are overwhelmed. So even if they end up loving your product or pitch, they might completely miss it. Whereas staff writer, they might not have as many pitches. So they're like, "Oh, I found this. I'm going to bring it to my editor." And then editor can either say, "Oh, I like this," or they might even look back in their emails and say, "Oh, I glanced at this and I almost missed it." So go ahead and do both. I would say don't get carried away. Like if you find lots of emails from one publication, just limit it to maybe three at the most, just because that might be a little bit hounding for people. But uh, I think that's safe to say.
Yeah, I love it. So you're not like all whispering, like, oh, I got this email. Did you get that email? Like you got way bigger fish to fry and you're very busy. Yeah, I mean, I love that. I think that's one of the because we love busting like limiting beliefs here, right, at GCPR. And you just told me and you validated it because you're actually a writer that it's okay to pitch to multiple writers as long as you do it intentionally and you know that they cover your beat. But here's another thing that I noticed as someone who is a PR expert, having hacked it on my own, is that a lot of times the editors aren't really going to be the one writing your story because they're busy like managing the team and managing the calendar. So, do you almost feel like it's better to build the relationship with a staff writer than like an editor who's like super high up and is really overwhelmed and busy?
I mean, I think that there is value in both, but yeah, go ahead and if you can start with that writer, and especially because the writer's probably going to be the biggest advocate to the editor. So if they really love your idea or they love working with you or both, then they'll probably be a little bit more determined to, pitch the editor. Um, and I guess it's probably a balance of both because it's good to have as many people on your radar as possible. So if you kind of have communicated even just a little bit with the editor and they're like, "Oh, I know so and so," or then that's great. I think that's you don't need to go past that. And then the rest of the work should go towards having those writers that are really enthusiastic about working with you because like you said, yeah, they're going to be writing the story and that's probably the most important part of the mission.
Yeah, and building that relationship. So another question I have is you've done the gift guides, the beauty, the e-commerce, entertainment, very different types of pitches. Do you think it's the same across the board in terms of like who you should contact first, like editor versus contributing writer? Is it different for e-commerce and gift guide versus let's say entertainment?
Ooh, that's a good question. So I would say, kind of similar to my other one, when you're thinking about who to contact, I would try to reach out to editor and writer or editor and whoever is covering the story, um, because I think even just with an array of like coverage, you still want kind of that main honcho or head honcho who's the editor to have their eyes on it. And I hope that answers your question like pretty well.
Yeah.
Just kind of similarly, you'll want everybody to have eyes on it to consider it. And again, that maintaining of a relationship with the writer is what you'll probably want to have in your back
Yeah.
pocket.
Yeah. So maybe the first round of pitching is pitch a wide net and then as you do your follow-up, like be more intentional.
Right, exactly. And also always remember if you're doing a follow-up to post or share any updates or anything. You can kind of sneak in another angle if you want to in those follow-ups. Say, oh man, I forgot to put that this is perfect for the summer. Like,
So
or
good.
I forgot,
I
yeah,
love the refreshener.
yes. Yeah, and just make sure you take advantage of those follow-up moments and not repeat the exact same thing, or else it
Yeah.
probably won't be as eye-catching as you're hoping.
Exactly. So this is exactly my next question is the journey, the follow up, because it's already a lot of it takes a lot of courage, right? For small business owners who are listening to even press the first send button. But I
Mhm.
know that the beauty is in the follow up. You know this as well because you write a lot of stories and you need to be reminded what is the right way to follow up and how can we use social media to leverage that and kind of nurture that relationship?
I would say keep the follow up short but succinct. Make sure that you first kind of remind them or reintroduce like what is the hook for this product if it's a product. So kind of like I said before, if it's like, oh, this is the perfect sunscreen, make sure that you kind of hook that in there, and also hook what your angle would be, like, oh, this would be great in a gift guide, or oh, we're getting towards holidays, not maybe not for sunscreen, but we're getting towards the holidays, how about this fall candle, things
Yeah.
like that, where the editor or writer will be like, oh, that's true. We are getting our list together. And social media, that's an interesting one, because I don't get too many interactions there. Sometimes I'd say it's a good sign, because what I like to do is if someone pitches me and maybe I haven't had the time to respond, it's been a while, but I'm just so busy, I will try to find their page on social media, and I would try to follow it. And sometimes I'll be like, I don't know if they see this, but it's my way of indicating like, hey, I like this product. Or even if I can't follow it for this, or I can't take it for this article, it usually means, oh, I really want to cover this, and I'm going to try to come back to it for another story.
Yeah.
So I would say, don't what you don't want to do is social media and follow-ups is a lot of writers don't like DMs. They don't like that, and it really depends on the writers.
Well, LinkedIn, right? I heard that LinkedIn is more acceptable.
Yeah. LinkedIn is good. And I do get some people message me on LinkedIn about their either a story or a product, and I think that's fine. Yeah, I think that if you're going to go social media route, LinkedIn is the place. Not to say that I have had social media, like Instagram, Twitter messages, and me personally, I don't mind, because sometimes people can't find your email. Um,
Right.
but I also know that there's a lot of writers who are just like, no, if you message me on social media, I will not work with you at all.
Mhm.
So I guess just
That's
be
rare, I
mindful.
think, right? Because they would actually put that on their profile
Right.
notes.
Yeah, a lot of people do that. And which, yeah, definitely keep an eye on those. Just to make sure. But I think that for the most part, yeah, LinkedIn, email, those are the places to go. And then I guess if all else fails and you're like, oh, I just can't figure out how to get in contact with them, and there's no disclaimer saying, please don't, DM me, then I say go for it. Send the Twitter message, because I have done that so many times in my life. And I'm like, wow, I'm so glad I did that. And I'm
Yeah.
so glad that they were so open and they were so like, oh, thanks for reaching out. So just trial and error
Yeah.
is what I recommend.
I always say for my PR starter pack students, everything you want is on the other side of the send button. I know
Mm,
that as a journalist, you're not going to respond to every email, but it's just a matter of sending that pitch. And you never know if it's 1 week or 1 month down the line, you're tasked with that story. You go back into your inbox and you do a search, right? Am I right?
mm. Yes, definitely.
Yeah, I think so. In terms of follow up, do you recommend following up every spacing it out maybe 7 days apart? So like first email and then like maybe refreshing the angle and then sending it again in 7 to 10 days?
Yes, I think that's a great time window, because, kind of like I said before, as writers, we get so many pitches and so many emails. So sometimes, like for myself, I'm like, oh my God, I promise everybody I'm coming. Like, and it
Yeah.
takes me time to, on top of my other work, to go through all the emails, because I guess this is rare, because, of course, as many of the people you work with probably know, some people never respond. And I've learned, especially as a freelancer who sends pitches myself, that it's never really personal. It's just people have so many emails that they're like, I will go crazy if I try to respond to each of them. But
Yeah.
personally, I try to get back to people because I know how that feels. You
Oh,
might be doubting yourself, like, oh man, this is a horrible pitch, or does the product look bad? So I'll usually say to people, like, oh, thank you, for sending this to me. It doesn't fit for what I'm working on now, but I want to consider something for the future or something like that.
yeah.
And just so people know that they do have something worthy of consideration, and but definitely give people that time window for following up, because I also have heard writers get kind of grumpy because they're like, "Ugh, this person has already like it kind of feels pestering," and that's definitely not what you want to do, is to make people feel overwhelmed or like
Yeah.
you're desperate, which again, as freelancers we have to learn that too, where it's like, oh
Yeah.
man, I really want to cover this, but I also can't send this person, a ton of follow-ups in a short span of
Yeah.
time.
Yeah, I mean, a ton of follow ups is not good, but I think if you follow up every week and if you refresh your subject lines, I think it's like showing relevancy. Now, let's go back to the hack, which you said works, which is you send an email, it gets open, but it doesn't, nothing happens, and then boom, we're in like a different season, like fall season. Do you change the subject line on the same email thread, or you do a completely new email?
Ooh, I would say do a completely new email because that will go to the top of someone's inbox.
Okay.
That will go to the top. And especially, like, again, as freelancers, we have to time our emails as well. So, especially if you send that pretty early in the morning. So, because yeah, when that person starts their workday, you want your email on top and
Yeah.
your fresh, shiny email. And like you said, if it's a different season, then you're definitely going to want to have a fresh angle for whatever the product is.
Yeah. I mean, we're always in between two worlds, two seasons, right? So, arguably, right now, at the time of recording, it's August. I could say, oh, well, this is what I pitch you for summer skincare. And now we're getting into the fall. So, how do you maintain that summer glow, right? So, I think it's not too much of a stretch to always feel like you can refresh your angles because there's always so much happening. Can you give me another way to make the email or subject line more appealing? Like, how do we add urgency? Can we name drop like a celebrity that maybe wore this trend? Like, what are some interesting ways to get noticed?
Yeah, so I mean, this is definitely the era of this TikTok trend, or yeah, like if you drop a celebrity and things like that. So all of those things can work because one thing that writers are always looking for, especially with products, is timeliness. Is this product something that people are talking about, or one that connects to something that people are talking about? Like, I guess one of the trends of the year is like Barbie core. So even if you don't have like clothes, if you have like a pink product, embrace your inner Barbie core with da da da. Things that play off of what people are kind of searching. So definitely, even if your product is your own original product, I would say search what is popular right now and find how your product fits into that world, and think of headlines that connect. And I always like things that are playful, and I think a lot of, especially beauty writers, they like that kind of stuff because they want things that people are going to be very excited about. So if you pick generics like it's so moisturizing, it's like, well, I mean that's good, but a lot of things are moisturizing. A lot of products are. So try to think of something that's very unique, that 1,000 other companies, brands aren't already pitching or already writing in their subject lines.
Yeah, I always say in my masterclass, it's kind of like peeling away the layer of an onion.
Mhm.
Everyone can peel the first layer, which is very general, reasons why you should use moisturizer this winter. But if you can get into the ingredients or maybe some like a different ingredient, like one time I had someone who does adaptogenic mushroom elixir. So she's doing like combining food with beauty. So that's really interesting, right? Because like that's something new. So I love what you said there as well. And also, if you feel like you don't have anything new, and again, no one has the groundbreaking thing that is completely unknown to the species of humankind, right? So
Mhm.
everything is a remix. It's just about what is the relevance piece, how is it tying to like whether the hot topic is sustainability or whatever it is. I love that you validated that too. So on the topic of relevance, right? This is the most important part, as you know, is what I teach in my masterclass. How do people find that relevance, and how do they know if it's relevant enough? Because for me to pitch something about sustainability, it's still very general. It's still very top layer of the onion. So can you give me an idea about what stories about, for example, sustainability would be more interesting to you versus just a very general one about sustainability?
I guess I would start by saying pay attention to the time of the year and of course current events, right? So for instance, certain like around Earth Day and things like that, I'm always looking for a sustainability story. Personally, I'm like, these are always relevant stories, but as readers, they're going to be looking for coverage that coordinates to what's going on. And I would say also if there is that kind of angle, and it's not, I guess it's not necessarily about saying like, oh, we save the world more with our product or something like that, but rather thinking of a different, like a way to approach it. And that can be either some places are like, oh, we generally give to like this organization. Well, find an organization that's very near and dear to your heart and say something about that. Say why this means so much to your brand. And I think that takes you a little bit away from the generic. It's not just, oh, they save trees, which is great, but also this means so much because like indigenous forests were destroyed at one
Yeah.
point and we're replanting and recreating. Things like that, I guess for me as a writer, I'm like, yes, like there's something bigger that you're telling me.
Yeah.
Um, and also I think the the problem with a lot of pitches are they have these really cool claims and that's great, but also don't be afraid to show people like what the impact of that is if you can, whether it's through talking to people that you've worked with and say, oh, because we have the sustainability of this product, this person was able to reuse something. Or like I love when certain products maybe come with like even seeds that people can plant to help with sustainability. Here are some of the things that we grow. So those are just kind of things I've seen before where I'm like, oh, this is different. This is not just them saying, oh, we give to this charity and
Yeah.
buy this. Because I think a lot of places can do that and it's good, but what more can you either say? Because not everyone has all the resources to be like, hey, look at all this cool stuff. But what stories can we tell that speak to this significance? And then also, what can we do?
Yeah, I love that. I mean, I think more and more media and journalism and activism are going hand in hand. It's never just a beauty product. It's never just a yoga mat. It's something else, right? So I definitely think that as founders become more confident in knowing that they're not just selling a product, right? They're doing so much more than that, and that comes through in their messaging. And that's really what I try to do in my business is to remind people of their why, right? It's not just you're
Mhm.
selling yoga mat, you're giving people mobility, you're giving people their life back. So I love what you said about that. Let's go into the actual email body of the pitch. What do you like to see lengthwise, attachments, offering samples? What's a really good way to really kind of write a simple email that gets your attention?
So I usually say kind of get to the point pretty quickly. So a lot of times we as writers, of course read through, but if we have like paragraphs and paragraphs, then at that point it gets kind of taxing. And I think, yeah, for a lot of people, they're familiar with keeping it kind of short. And then, yeah, I'm a firm believer in offering images and samples because a lot of the times people are hesitant to write about a product that they haven't tried before because it's like, oh, how can you speak to the quality and how can you speak to the everything like the packaging, the quality, but also I depending on how large or small a company is, that might not be realistic. So in that case, I would just think of ways like, okay, what can we do? Like, can we show them a video of the product? Like, does that help? Something that can get people as close as they can to having a good idea of what it's like. And then What I also like is ingredients. Like if we're talking beauty, especially like TikTok and YouTube and all that good stuff, like they have their breakdowns of like, oh, these are the ingredients we're looking for right now, um, and people are going to be wanting to see like, okay, do they have things that are going to be moisturizing? Like, what does this do?
Mm,
So that's what I like to see. Like, what is the end result? Like, is this going to help smooth out textured skin? Or is it going to help, like, with the porosity of the hair? Or things
yeah.
like that. Things that are speaking to the results. And then, of course, kind of going back to that mission like, okay, what are we trying to say? Do we want to say something like, oh, we're helping with self-confidence, right? Like have your curls bouncing because this is you should feel confident because people with curly hair are sometimes not seen as beautiful or something like that. And I think that you pretty much have what you need at that point. Sometimes people go into tangents, like side stories or things like that, where I'm like, it might even be really cute, but at the same time, you probably will lose your reader or lose the
Yeah.
person considering the pitch.
So what's the ideal length and how many seconds do you actually spend scanning it?
Oh goodness. So that's a hard one for me to say. But I would say like try to try to have at the very most like three short paragraphs, and then if you like have the images of the product, maybe short descriptions. And that's what I generally see. So I would keep that in mind. Um, and I'd also say that for me, I'll I honestly do. I probably read more than most do, because I like to kind of get the general idea. Like, okay, this is what the brand is called. This is what they're doing. Look at product description. So if you kind of answer those things, then I think you're in a good place.
Yeah, I love that. Woo, so good. I hope anyone who is listening to this episode, if you're driving or walking your dog, come back because the last 5 minutes was like boom, like PR masterclass material. So thank you so much for giving us exactly how to write an email, subject lines. You've given us so many gems. I want to talk about what the work you're doing now, which I think is really important. Which is entertainment representation. Can you tell me a little bit about kind of the stories you want to cover, and being someone who is seeing all the stories, how is representation in media and journalism changing?
Yeah, we see from all aspects of Hollywood that there is a nature of gatekeeping. So, when it comes to not just acting, but for writing and producing and even doing costumes and hair and casting, there are limited opportunities for people who aren't white and men. And I really am passionate about writing about those stories. So, whether it's people who aren't getting access to the jobs in the industry and need mentorship, or it's the people who are dealing with these toxic fandom. We've seen actors of color getting casted, and then all of a sudden people are furious because they're not a white actor or something like that. And I really want to kind of say, hey, who's going to hold Hollywood accountable and what are the bigger problems at play? At times it's racism, it's sexism, it's ableism, it's anti-blackness, things that we see at the core of these, and they trickle into Hollywood. And I'm interested in getting the voices of those talent and also making sure that there is an avenue in entertainment that's not just about the glitz and the glamour, because a lot of people see it as fluff, but I'm like, well, maybe, but also this is people's lives and they impact who is on screen. And when kids and even adults see who's on screen, and that has an influence. How different cultures are depicted, different stories. Are they authentic or are they imagined? Are they stereotyped? All of those things where I'm just like, I really want to make sure that these stories are being handled with love and authenticity.
Oof, my God, your words resonate with my soul. I'm so happy that you're here and that we connected because I'm so aligned in that way as well. It's we all got to do our part, right, to rewrite the narrative, and you're doing your part and being a vehicle of change. So amazing, props to you. I am cheering you on for the work that you're doing. I know as an Asian American woman, I don't really see much of myself in any space. So especially now I'm teaching people how to get into the media. It's kind of like, huh? But that's the work we got to do, right? Is we got to build our own table if the table is not ready for us to sit at, and then we can invite other people to our table. So looking ahead, like what kind of stories are you most interested in or resonating with, like either now or that you're looking to write in the future?
Yeah, so like what I mentioned with mentorship, I love that we're seeing more production companies that are founded by people of color, by women, by queer creators. I want to write about what they're doing. And I also want to showcase like stories that should have been told a long time ago, but are now just getting their time in the sun. And I love shows like Abbott Elementary. Like that's my latest. I mean, I shouldn't even say latest, but I've just been obsessing over that show. And I'm just like, yes, give it all its flowers because it's talking about diversity, education, and so many important things. And I look forward to telling stories about different communities of fans as well. So communities of fans that don't get the attention that they deserve, that are really passionate about the shows. And then I guess the list can go on and on. There's certain shows that are being canceled that are represent like beautifully representing people of color, and it's like, why does this happen? So definitely want to delve into those questions and get to the root of them.
Oh, I love that. I look forward to following your writing as you do this amazing work. Thank you so much for giving us like such an extensive look at not only media representation but the nitty-gritties of how to write an email. I feel like this is an episode that people will have to come back to over and over. I know I'm going to come back to it and take a lot of notes. So I'm really excited for everyone to hear this. How can people find you and connect with you and support your work?
Yeah, so on my social media, like Twitter, Instagram, and all that good stuff, I'm D Broadway Writes, and pretty much like you can find me on those platforms, and also as a staff writer at Reuters. Pretty soon, I'll have my staff page established, so you can see what I'm up to and what my latest articles are.
Yay! Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate you.
Oh, I appreciate you too, Gloria. Thank you.